What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video from Pink Tourmaline, and today we are going to be diving into Gnosticism. Man, it's been a whirlwind since I made since my last video. I made that one-off video about David Icke talking about reincarnation being a trap, and that the near-death experiences that so many people report are actually manipulations of us basically to encourage us to keep reincarnating and coming back to this planet to endure suffering and pain for the benefit of other entities that are feeding off this negativity. And it really kind of shattered my world when I started hearing about this, because when I first discovered near-death experiences, I said, finally, we have a window into what goes on after we pass on. First of all, it confirms, obviously, that the soul and our consciousness exists beyond the material, which I was feeling like that was likely to be the case, just based on logic and common sense and just understanding energy. But then I said, okay, wow, it's this beautiful awakening when you leave. And then now it's an understanding of why we're even here. It's a learning process. Life is a school. And I'm not saying I've discounted that notion completely, but Gnosticism, this idea of Gnosticism and what David Icke has been saying, has gotten me to really rethink how this could all work together. And as I mentioned many times on this channel, this is a channel of, I'm just trying to find the truth. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. I'm not setting my ways in any particular perspective. I'm not saying I'm this religion and I'm going to show you guys why it's right. I don't know still what's happening. So I'm just trying to trudge forward and understand things as best I can. I don't want this to be the nature of reality because it's kind of scary that we might be trapped in some way, but there are things that make sense. There's some other things that don't make as that much sense. So we're just going to go through Gnosticism just from my surface level understanding thus far as I've started to research it. Now, why did I even get turned on to Gnosticism? When I made that video about David Icke, a lot of people in the comments said, you got to look into Gnosticism. This is what the Gnostics say, and that's just David Icke's theories are in line with Gnosticism. You really need to learn about this. And so I've been learning. I've actually bought a bunch of books. I actually started watching some YouTube videos as well that explain the gist of Gnosticism. I have a long way to go, but I got to say that there are some very interesting ideas and thoughts in some of these tenets of Gnosticism. I think it's also important to note that Gnosticism, a lot of the philosophies and ideas come from a blending of some of the teachings of Jesus, as well as other Eastern religions, including like Hinduism, Buddhism, and things like that. So you'll notice some parallels and overlaps. So I'm going to need to, at some point, also dig into the history of how this was created to understand the people at the time that were creating these philosophies and ideas and all of that. But without further ado, let's get into the mix. And I want to start by just giving some of the basics. We're going to be going through this awesome video called The Secrets of Gnosticism. It's like a 30-minute run through of what all these teachings and ideas are about. So here, this is the first main idea. The critical idea is we are meant to transcend the material world. Maybe a better way to say it is we are meant to escape the material world, that we are currently in some sort of, people talk about this world or this universe being a simulation. And this kind of coincides with that idea that this is some sort of simulation, but not a simulation for our benefit or for our growth, but instead that it's a trap. And we are trapped here, of course, not trapped indefinitely. We can be liberated, but we are here right now, not for any benefits to ourselves, but benefits to other entities. And we're gonna play this and hear this, but that is the main objective. Really, is not to learn and grow and continue to elevate ourselves according to the Gnostic texts and the Gnostic ideas, but instead we're just trying to get out and get back to our true identity, which is a connection and a oneness with the true Creator, with the true unity that really is the source of energy and information and knowledge for all of us that we're all connected to. So let's check this out.
In Gnostic thought, the material world was often seen as a prison or a veil that concealed the truth. The world we experience through our senses, full of suffering and impermanence, was created not by the highest divine being, but by a lower, ignorant god, the demiurge. The demiurge was the architect of the physical world, often depicted as a blind and malevolent force. According to the Gnostics, the soul's journey was to awaken to its true nature, transcend the material realm, and reunite with the true divine source of all existence. This view of the world was radically different from that of the emerging Orthodox Christian Church. Early Christians believed that God created the world and declared it good. They also held that salvation came through faith in Jesus Christ and the promise of eternal life. The Gnostic path, however, was more individualistic and inwardly focused. It was not about following the external religious rituals prescribed by the Church, but about discovering a hidden truth within oneself, something that, according to Gnostic texts, was hidden even in the teachings of Jesus Christ himself.
Okay, so again, there's a lot of things that I really like about this, and there's ties and roots to traditional or mainstream, I guess you could say, Christianity, but there's a lot to unpack there. So first of all, we go back to this idea that the Gnostics really believe that the ability to transcend the material world is all within us, and that's kind of what I think a lot of Eastern philosophies and really what I believe intrinsically, that we all have this connection to God or to the divine. Like, that makes so much more sense to me, and that is the essence of our soul and our energy, versus relying on one person that maybe not everybody even knows about or has access to, and then having to believe in that person to be liberated or to reach this salvation point. Like, that's never made sense to me on a logical standpoint. I'm not saying it's 100% wrong, and feel free to disagree with me in the comments, but this is just something, since I was a young kid and I learned about the teachings of some of these major mainstream religions of like Christianity and whatnot, that idea that you have to have this blind faith in order to achieve salvation. But what about everything else? What about all the other things that we're meant to do or try to help people or spread positivity? No, it's just simply faith. And that seemed more like a control mechanism. That's the easy explanation. Why are you making it such an important tenet of this belief system, that of this religious system, that you must have it blind adherence? It felt like a control mechanism, versus this idea makes a lot more sense to me, that the divine, the connection to the divine is in all of us. We don't need a church. We don't need a system. We don't need leaders to look up to or have to follow in order to achieve salvation. It's all within us. That makes a lot more sense to me, at least comparatively to traditional Christian teachings. And please chime in the comments, as I mentioned, if you feel otherwise, and please explain why you feel otherwise, because as I mentioned, I don't know everything by any means. The other thing that is interesting about this idea that the world is imperfect and all of that stuff, and created by a lower entity, and hence we have all these imperfections. Man, I've been thinking about this a lot, because I love life. I love my life. I love living on this planet and having all the experiences and adventures that I've had. And it's great to be a human on this planet. But then this really got me thinking about what is life on this planet. And yes, we have amazing moments. We get to do cool things. We get to travel. We get to be around loved ones. But if you really think about life on this planet, every day we are consuming, and usually consuming by eating, meaning we're killing every day. You know, I'm a meat eater, and even if it's plant matter, we're destroying to survive and to go on and on and on. And so if you really strip away, like, the way that our lives are set up right now, we buy our food in packages at the grocery store and we go back and make it, and it feels very pure and amazing to have these awesome meals or go to restaurants or whatnot. But underlying all of that is just, we're just constantly feeding off of other entities or organisms or whatnot that all occupy this planet. So is that really, like, that does seem like a flawed, problematic place that we're in right now, just constant wheel and revolving of suffering. I mean, I don't know. I was starting to have this thoughts. I'm like, this idea that the world is actually a twisted, sort of like backwards place foundationally starts to make sense a little bit. So anyways, these are some of the things that I'm thinking about. Now, I'll say on the other side, when we talk about this place being a trap and us wanting to kind of keep reincarnating or keep coming back to the planet, I could see that. But then if that's really the objective, why are we programmed to live, to age, and to die? Wouldn't it make more sense to have longer lives and just be trapped longer? Although maybe there's a reason why that's not better. Maybe when you live longer, you're more likely, for a particular lifespan, you're more likely to achieve enlightenment and zip off and zip out of the prison. And so maybe that's why intentionally, by design, a lot of the lifespans are as short as they are. I don't know. I mean, like I said, these are just real questions that I'm having in my mind as I'm trying to understand and break down whether or not there's credibility or credence to this entire philosophy. Okay, moving on. One of the core fundamental beliefs is salvation can be achieved via direct access to hidden divine knowledge.
They believed that salvation was achieved not through adherence to external laws, but through direct access to this hidden divine knowledge. Eastern religions, particularly Zoroastrianism and Hinduism, also contributed to the Gnostic worldview. Zoroastrianism's dualism between the forces of light and darkness resonated with Gnostic thinkers who often portrayed the material world as the domain of darkness, in opposition to the light of spiritual knowledge. Similarly, Eastern traditions that spoke of transcending the material world in pursuit of spiritual liberation echoed the Gnostic desire to return to a state of unity with the divine.
I mean, you look around at the world today, all the crazy stuff that's happening with the people at the tippy top of our societies, all these scandals that are coming out and all the crazy, horrible things that are happening. Like, this idea starts to make a little bit more sense through that lens, that that maybe the world is flawed by design, is messed up by design, and our aims to try and be good or try and be spiritually enlightened, those pursuits are very difficult by design because of the way that everything's created and set up and structured. Like, it does resonate with me on some level. Like I said, I'm almost hoping that there are things that don't match up where I can set this aside, because I think how I previously felt about life just being a school and a lesson to constantly improve and get better, that feels better to me. But like I said, I'm just trying to analyze everything one step at a time. Okay, moving on. This comes back to the notion that this is not for our benefit, but this is just a trap for us to keep coming back over and over and over as almost like a farm, as a food source for these lower entities, I guess, like the demiurge, as they call it, and really who they say the demiurge is, who the creator of this flawed material world is, another name for this entity that is the Yahweh in the Old Testament, which is a whole nother interesting, crazy part about these thoughts and about this philosophy. But check this out.
One of the most prominent features of Gnosticism is its belief in the demiurge, a lesser divine being or creator god who is responsible for the creation of the material world. The demiurge is often depicted as ignorant, flawed, and malevolent, with a distorted view of the divine realm. The demiurge traps the divine spark or soul of humans in the physical world, preventing them from attaining true knowledge, Gnosis, and returning to the spiritual realms of the true, unknowable God. In Gnostic cosmology, the God of the Old Testament, often identified as Yahweh, is typically equated with the demiurge, the creator god of the material world who is seen as a tyrant or a false god. This belief is rooted in the idea that Yahweh is depicted in the Old Testament as a god who is concerned with law, punishment, and domination, rather than with spiritual enlightenment and liberation. For instance, in the Gnostic text, On the Origin of the World, part of the Nag Hammadi library, Yahweh is portrayed as the blind, ignorant God who creates the world but is unaware of the higher divine realm. He creates the material world in an attempt to keep the soul trapped within it, preventing humanity from achieving Gnosis or spiritual awakening.
You see, people talk about the conflict of the God of the Old Testament versus the God of the New Testament, and the plagues and all these other things that happened at Yahweh's request, and it just doesn't seem to add up. Well, I guess this perspective or this view, it makes more sense. Now, again, this is just comparatively, right? Like to some of these traditional religions or traditional texts, like you could dismiss those altogether, and oftentimes I do. So I'm not saying that just by comparison, because this makes more sense, that this is the right thing. I'm not saying that, but there are parts of this idea that do make sense when you just look around at the world and really take a glance at everything that's happening right now. We're in the midst of a war. There's just constant destruction and killing and lies and manipulation that happen on the regular. Like, can that be undone, or is this literally baked into the framework of this material world? And hence our ideas of fixing everything or having a golden era of enlightenment is basically impossible within the physical realm. We have to transcend the physical realm to really have unity. Like, it kind of makes sense. Again, very early in this journey of understanding Gnosticism, but from that standpoint, it kind of makes sense. Okay, here's the next part. These are the tools, apparently, according to Gnosticism, of the demiurge of Yahweh to keep us controlled.
For Gnostics, the material world is not a place of divine harmony and goodness, but a prison that keeps the soul from ascending to the higher realms. In Gnostic thought, Yahweh is often depicted as a tyrannical ruler who seeks to maintain control over humanity through the imposition of strict laws and commandments. The laws of the Old Testament, which require adherence to rituals, sacrifices, and moral codes, are viewed by Gnostics as the tools of the demiurge to keep people in ignorance and bondage to the material.
Right? Like that part makes sense to me. What that is a piece of inherent in all religions. I'm not saying the sacrifices nowadays, or maybe they are some sects of these different religions, but yeah, the rituals, the routines, coming to the churches, coming to these other organizations that seem to have a monopoly on our ability to connect with the divine. It makes sense that these are essentially, because that's what I've always felt, that they are more or less tools of control. And I guess this is a belief that the Gnostics also shared. Again, we have to take this into context. Like as I dig more in and I look into the history of this religion, there may be reasons why they felt this way. Maybe there's a lot of religious unrest or conflicts between different religions, and hence that's why they form these beliefs, right? It's this feels to me to be a religion or a set of philosophies that came about by analyzing a lot of different philosophies at the time. You know, maybe they didn't have access to everything we have now access to. A lot of these near-death experiences weren't formulated and compiled and easy to go through like they are now. So I'm just saying we have to bear that in mind. But I will say there are things about this philosophy and this idea of the world. It's almost like they're framing the world as, if you even buy, like I've made so many videos about why the notion of hell is nonsensical to me, but if you're going to even equate anything to this negative, dark place, it kind of makes sense when you think about it, that this physical material world is this dark prison that we're hoping to get out of. And again, not saying it's eternal, but we're here until we're able to get out. This idea kind of resonating with me to some extent. Anyways, now we're going to talk about the creation story and how it differs from the traditional creation story that occurs in many religions, but specifically like the the Judeo-Christian creation story. So check this out.
The creation narrative in the Old Testament, found in the book of Genesis, is central to Judeo-Christian theology. In this story, God, Yahweh, creates the world in 6 days, culminating in the creation of Adam and Eve, the first humans. The story is often understood as a divine act of creation where God shapes the universe in an orderly and purposeful manner, with humans being the pinnacle of creation. However, for Gnostics, the Genesis creation story is not one of divine order, but a tale of imperfect creation by a lower, flawed deity, the demiurge. Instead of seeing creation as an act of divine goodness and beauty, Gnostics view it as an act of trapping the divine spark within the material world. The Gnostic interpretation often sees Adam and Eve as symbols of the human soul being imprisoned in the body and the physical world.
So that's it. The creation was, like, it's crazy, man, but the material world is essentially just a big simulated prison, and all of us are pieces of that divine spark, then trapped in these material bodies for the duration of our lives to endure what we endure. And I guess if you take this in concert with what David Icke was saying, the whole purpose of it is to feed off of the negativity and the anxiety and all these negative emotions that we thus generate in this imperfect world. Again, I don't know the larger picture, but this is, again, the combination of the Gnostic philosophy with the stuff that David Icke was saying. And then, according to Gnostics, here is how salvation is reached. And sort of it comes back to what we were saying before. It's not through the worship of a church or entity or a person, but it all comes from within. All comes from within, which I feel like ties into thoughts for ideas from Buddhism, from Hinduism, etc., that it all comes from self-reflection, meditation, and these types of processes.
At the core of Gnostic belief is the notion that salvation is attained through the acquisition of secret knowledge, Gnosis. This knowledge is not intellectual or conceptual, but is an intuitive, direct, and experiential understanding of the divine, a type of wisdom that allows an individual to transcend the material world and recognize their true nature as a divine being. In many Gnostic texts, it is believed that the divine spark or inner light exists within every human being, but this spark is often obscured or trapped by the material world and the physical body. Through Gnosis, individuals can awaken to the reality that they are part of a greater divine cosmos, beyond the physical limitations of space, time, and the material world. This inner knowledge provides them with the tools to break free from the cycle of suffering and rebirth, achieving spiritual liberation and reunion with the divine source. Gnosis, in this context, is deeply personal and transformative, as it transcends the outward rituals of religion. The Gnostic path to salvation involves the awakening of one's inner knowledge, which leads to enlightenment and a deeper connection with the divine.
There it is, connection with the divine via enlightenment. And again, it's not I think they're not saying it's like we have to carry out this crazy analysis and have incredible intelligence to understand this. It's sort of an inner awareness and understanding of our divine connection, not through these religious rites or ceremonies or adherence to a particular church or anything like that. You know, when you think about the world as well, I'm sure you guys have reflected on this as well, which I have many a time. You just think, man, the world is so backwards. It's so upside down. We have essentially the most morally bankrupt people on top leading us. Why? Has it always been like that? Is this a recent development, especially with the Epstein files and everything that's coming out? We see just how perverse the upper echelons of our society is. And it should be the reverse. We should be looking for the most morally in tune people to be leading us, but it doesn't seem to be that way. Is that just something that we need to all rise up and change, or is this inherent to the system that we're trapped in? It's a flawed system by design. It's a negative system by design, and this will continue to keep happening. And really the only way to fix things is to transcend the material world where things are as they should be. You know, it's just food for thought, but it is a fascinating idea. Well, this is my first deep dive into Gnosticism, again, at the behest of so many people that commented on my last video involving David Icke. So I hope you guys enjoy this as I continue to dive deeper. I'm going to really start reading through a lot of these texts and watching more videos and learning about this. It's very interesting. I'm not saying I'm 100% all in on Gnosticism as my path going forward and trying to understand why we're here and what the whole objective of this life is, or maybe there is no objective, right? Maybe the whole objective is to escape and to get out and get back in touch with our true inner knowledge with Gnosis. I don't know, but I'm going to keep learning. I'm going to keep trying to figure this out to the best of my ability. So that's all I got for you guys today. Please comment. Please tell me if there's more things that you want me to read or look into. I will happily oblige, as this is not just for me, but this is for all of you as well as we go on this journey together. Thank you guys so much for joining, and we'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.